This is the end of the battleship era, built at the peak of steel and gun naval warfare. Commissioned on June 11, 1944, the USS Missouri entered service as the last battleship ever built for the United States Navy. Her hull carried the designation BB-63, but her presence was anything but a number. At nearly 900 feet in length, 887 feet to be exact, she stretched longer than the Titanic, with a beam of 108 feet that barely squeezed through the Panama Canal's locks. Fully loaded, Missouri tipped the scales at close to 58,000 tons, a mass so immense that it is almost impossible to picture without standing beside her. Above the waterline, her superstructure soared, and below, her hull ran deep, 37 feet from the surface to her keel when packed for combat. Even with this colossal weight, Missouri could surge past 30 knots, a speed that left older battleships in her wake and allowed her to keep pace with fast carrier groups. 4 massive propellers, each driven by powerful turbines, churned the water behind her with 225,000 shaft horsepower. A crew of more than 2,700 called Missouri home during World War II. Every inch of her steel was designed for war at the grandest scale, the kind of war that demanded not just strength, but spectacle. Compared to the USS Arizona, lost at Pearl Harbor, Missouri stretched 279 feet longer and 11 feet wider. Stood upright, her bow would tower over the Washington Monument by more than 300 feet. She was the final word in battleship design, a fortress built at the peak of the steel and gun era, arriving just as that age was drawing to a close. The story of Missouri's birth is a race against time and a triumph of American industry. On January 6, 1941, her keel was laid down at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, a date that landed just weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor had forced the United States into global war. The urgency was palpable. Yards operated under floodlights. Welders and riveters worked around the clock, winter and summer, to turn blueprints into steel reality. More than 3 million man-days were poured into her construction. That's thousands of workers, foremen, machinists, electricians, and laborers, each with a job so specific that the loss of even a single shift could ripple across the entire schedule. The Missouri's hull took shape in just over 3 years, a testament to wartime mobilization. On January 29, 1944, she slid down the ways and touched water for the first time, her bow cutting the East River as crowds cheered from the piers. The ship was still bristling with scaffolding, but the sense of urgency never faded. Outfitting and sea trials followed at a relentless pace as the Pacific War reached its fever pitch. By December 24, 1944, Missouri arrived at Pearl Harbor, her hull still smelling of fresh paint, her decks crowded with sailors eager for action. She had crossed the continent and the Panama Canal, entering the Pacific not as a relic, but as the sharpest blade in the Navy's arsenal. The speed of her construction and the sheer human effort behind it stand as a reminder of what it took to build a warship designed to change the course of history. 9 16-inch guns define Missouri's silhouette, each barrel stretching 68 feet, weighing 134 tons, and able to hurl a 2,700-pound shell farther than the eye can follow. Fired together, these guns unleashed a broadside that sent shockwaves through the ocean itself, boiling the surface and rattling every bulkhead aboard. The range is staggering. More than 23 nautical miles, enough to strike targets beyond the horizon. What once needed a team of spotters and luck was now guided by technology. The Mark 38 fire control system, paired with the Mark 13 radar, could track a moving ship or pinpoint a shoreline battery even in darkness or fog. A gunnery chief, standing in the cramped director tower, watched radar blips glide across a cathode screen, dialed in bearing and elevation, and gave the order, fire. In 90 seconds, all 9 guns could reload and send another salvo. Missouri's accuracy was no longer a matter of guesswork. Radar made her main battery a precision weapon, able to land shells on a postage stamp from miles away. This was firepower at its most refined, and warfare at its most unforgiving. Armor runs like a spine through Missouri's story. Along her waterline, 12 inches of steel, 13.5 inches over the steering gear, formed a barrier that could shrug off shells meant to break a ship in half. The faces of her main turrets wore a shield nearly 20 inches thick, more than enough to swallow the impact of another battleship's best shot. Deep inside the conning tower, where the captain and officers fought the ship, was wrapped in 17 inches of armor, a vault designed to survive even as chaos raged outside. Sailors, like the damage control petty officer, drilled for fire and flooding, knowing that every inch of this armor bought precious time in battle. Yet the moment that defined Missouri came not from incoming fire, but from the silence of peace. On September 2nd, 1945, her decks, just an inch and a half of steel underfoot, became the stage for history's closing act. General Douglas MacArthur stood at a table set on the main deck, flanked by Allied officers, as Japanese delegates signed the surrender that ended the Second World War. The ship built as a fortress to fight was now the symbol of war's end, a paradox as striking as her armor. Naval historians point to a turning point that arrived even before Missouri's keel touched water. The thunder of battleship guns had dominated strategy for decades, but by 1944, the world's navies were already looking skyward. Aircraft carriers, once considered auxiliary, had proven their reach at Midway and Leyte Gulf, sinking enemy ships from beyond the horizon. Jet aircraft and guided missiles soon extended that reach even further, outpacing the range of even Missouri's mighty 16-inch guns. Analysts studying post-war budgets found that a single carrier could project power over thousands of miles, while a battleship demanded thousands of sailors and millions of dollars in upkeep just to stand ready. Submarines, silent and unseen, threatened even the most heavily armored hulls. No new battleships were laid down after Missouri. The Navy's own studies, conducted in the late 1940s and early 1950s, concluded that armor and big guns could not defend against the new generation of threats. The cost of operating a ship like Missouri, both in dollars and manpower, became harder to justify as technology shifted the balance. The battleship, once the centerpiece of naval power, found itself eclipsed by ships that could strike faster and with fewer hands aboard. The age of steel and gun fortresses was ending, not with a final broadside, but with the quiet logic of doctrine, economics, and innovation. Missouri's story didn't end with the surrender in Tokyo Bay. 5 years later, her guns thundered again, this time along the Korean coast. No longer hunting enemy fleets, she turned her fire inland, blasting rail lines, bunkers, and artillery positions that threatened UN troops. Forward observers, perched on rocky hills or crouched in muddy trenches, radioed in targets and watched in awe as 16-inch shells landed with surgical precision. One Marine officer described the effect as erasing entire hillsides. Missouri's main battery, designed for duels at sea, became a lifeline for soldiers on the ground. The accuracy and reach of her salvos set a new standard for naval gunfire support. Yet, keeping a ship of her size at sea demanded a crew of thousands, and a budget Congress was less willing to approve in peacetime. By February 1955, Missouri was decommissioned and mothballed at Bremerton, her future uncertain, but her legend very much alive. Missouri's story didn't end in the mothball fleet. In 1986, she returned to service, reborn for the missile age. Her decks bristled with 32 Tomahawk cruise missiles and 16 Harpoon anti-ship missiles, sitting alongside her 9 original 16-inch guns. Upgraded radar and electronics gave her a new edge, while a smaller crew, now just under 1,900, ran a ship that could strike targets hundreds of miles inland. When Operation Desert Storm erupted in 1991, Missouri fired Tomahawks and unleashed her big guns against Iraqi positions, making headlines as the last battleship to see combat. Her final operational mission came on December 7, 1991, 50 years after Pearl Harbor. Decommissioned for good in March 1992, Missouri found a new life as a memorial. Former crew members and visitors now walk her decks, reflecting on a ship that began as a weapon and ended as a witness to history's turning points. Missouri's guns have fallen silent, but her presence endures, 900 feet of steel marking the final chapter of an era defined by raw power. In a world shaped by digital warfare, her scale and paradox remind us even the mightiest machines are ultimately judged by what they end. Share your thoughts below.